There we go. Well, welcome back. This is the book 5. What do you got for us, Chris?
Yeah, awesome. Book 5, Your Magical Learning. I'm really excited about this book today. It's called The Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. Which, first off, what a cool name! Like I wish my name was Merlin Sheldrake. I mean, it just sounds like a, a Bond villain, wizard. I don't know. I mean,
It
just like
reminds me of a wizard in ancient times.
right. I mean, it's just such a good name. Anyway, so this book.
Kudos to the parent.
Exactly. So the book is called, once again, Entangled Life. It's how fungi make up our worlds, change our mind, and shape our future, by the author Merlin Sheldrake. And the book itself is all about fungi. It's all about looking at fungi from a number of different angles. You know, how they work in our world. As it says here, decomposition, fermentation, nutrient distribution, psilocybin production, the evolutionary role they play in plants, etc. Just kind of everything you want to know about fungi. This book has it. Side note, I don't know. Are you a fan of that the show Ted Lasso by any chance?
I heard of it, but I don't. I'm not familiar with it as much.
Gotcha. It's such a good show. One of my favorite shows. I don't watch a lot of shows, but it's one of my favorite shows that I watch on TV for sure.
Mm-hmm.
One of the coaches randomly in the show, he's a kind of a hip dude, cool dude or whatever, and he's like, I don't know. If you watch the show, you would understand.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, his name's The Beard, and one of the last episodes, he was chilling back at his desk while they were, talking about like a coaching session, and he was reading The Entangled Life. And I was like, oh shit, he's reading The Entangled Life. That's awesome. I thought that was really funny, kind of a cool reference, pop culture reference, I guess, if you will. Anyway, so the reason why I picked up this book, as you can read in the reflection. Oh, by the way, my reflection title is that we're the composers, and I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second. So I picked up this book in particular because the microbiome, kind of our bacteria, fungi, just in general, has always been a bit of an obsession of mine for the past, I don't know, 15 or 20 years or so. I was diagnosed as a celiac, as in my early 20s. So I'm 37 now. And I was, for those of you that don't know, a celiac is somebody that can't eat gluten, wheat, barley, and rye, basically. So those things, for whatever reason, that protein affects my intestines. It doesn't allow nutrients and vitamins to pass through. That's what being a celiac is. So it causes it wreaks havoc. Your microbiome is so important in your life, right? And for me, it was wreaking havoc in my life. And I'm blessed and lucky to be able to, that I was diagnosed when I was in my early 20s, that I was a celiac, and they caught it early. And, ever since, I've really not had any issues. And I'm glad that I found that out. That was when my obsession of the microbiome kind of started a little bit. And I've learned a lot about it over the years. And then, it really kind of kicked it into overdrive when my daughter passed away from a disease called NEC, or NEC, which stands for Necrotizing Enterocolitis. It's a disease that's only really found in small, tiny preemies, like Amelia was, and essentially her microbiome kind of attacks her intestinal walls, and it causes perforations in it and allows stuff in your gut to leak out into your abdomen, and can cause sepsis and a lot of other bacterial infections and things like that. And that was unfortunately, for Amelia, something that she experienced early on in her life. And we dealt with the complications of that the entire time that she was in the NICU. And unfortunately, it ended up ultimately, being what took her life. So for me, this the understanding more about the microbiome universe and understanding more about these incredibly important roles that bacteria and fungi play in our lives, it was really important for me. So that's why I picked up this book. It was something that I was searching out and found a great, story to read and a great book to read about, and learn about in it. So, one of the things as I was going through this book that I learned about fungi is just, I think the biggest thing that I learned is how big of a role they play in this entire world. The author kept talking about the word symbiosis. That was the first time I ever heard the word symbiosis. Was from Merlin Sheldrake, and that's two different, organisms that don't see, or species that don't get along, that somehow they have a symbiotic relationship where one can't function without the other one. And fungi, they may be tiny little microorganisms, but they play just such an incredibly important role in all the functionalities of the universe. And it made me start to think a lot about, the topic of the mission of Clubany, which is balance, right? And that's about trying to find and live a balanced life, and everybody has a role to play in a balanced existence. And fungi are something that we don't really see, but play a huge vital role in keeping our world in harmony and to keeping life in general in harmony. And one thing in particular that really stood out to me was that, he kept talking about how they were the decomposers. They can decompose anything. Fungi, you give them a cigarette butt, they'll decompose it. You give them an apple, we turn it into, cider. We turn it into alcohol. We, give them grains, and we turn it into bread and yeast, and turn it into beer or whatever it may be, right? A lot of the stuff that we eat, pickles and different fermentation and breaking down of stuff, is fungi at work. And I kept hearing that word decomposer, and it made me think a little bit deeper about, like, so what's our role if this is all about a balanced universe? Like what's humans' role? And for me, it was about if they're the decomposers of the world, I feel like humans are the composers of the world. We can take anything and everything and mash it all up together and create this beautiful new, anything. Like, I mean, anything that we want to turn our imagination toward, we can take all these crazy elements of this universe and somehow, turn it into this beautiful new thing, whether it be a skyscraper, whether it be, a new game that we invent, whether it be, medical, advances and innovations, whether it be, drugs or chemicals or whatever to change certain things. It's just like what humans are able to do as the composers of the universe. If fungi are the decomposers, I feel like, we're the composers, really. We can turn anything together, and that's our role to play in a balanced universe. So that was my reflection from the Entangled Life, I guess, and kind of what I learned from it and what it sparked in me. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Well, first off, have you read the book? I mean, I don't think you've ever read this one. But what do you think of it?
Actually,
Yeah.
I have.
Nice.
I love the book, and to me, you bring up an interesting point. It's just that if there are decomposers, there has to be composers. Just because it's the way the world works, and you have to have, the one that's gonna balance you out. If you. Inside Clubany, one of the ingredient of a great team, you have to have a seller and a builder. I mean, you can't just all sell nothing. You can just all build and nothing happens to it. So I think the world and the universe has his unique balance, and it's a great title to say the Entangled Life, just because everything's entangled. Because we need the bacteria and the fungi as much as the bacteria needs us, because just like a cycle of between plants and animal. I mean, plant can't survive without the animal making carbon dioxide, and animals can't breathe without plant making oxygen. And so that's the equilibrium cycle that we live in, and everything has to do with the balance of the yin and the yang. And I think this is kind of, I mean, to me, before reading the book, the fungi, the bacteria seems like a mystery to a lot of people, to me especially. And but this book kind of elaborates and kind of brings me to another plane that I never thought about, how human can be composer, and we have a unique role of building things. We are builders. So so
like the beavers, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So we have a unique skills. Fungi has the unique skills. We have all unique skills, and as long as we play our part, our life is going to be in balance. And I think it's a great book to learn specifically about the fungi, the bacteria, but also kind of take you to another level of a new perspective of thinking. So I think I highly recommend this book if anybody hasn't read it. It has multiple fold of meaning to it, and just how things are integrated there on the surface.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. Like I would highly recommend this book too. I had a blast reading this one. I've never I could you know talk about like paradigm shifts of life.
Hmm.
Like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever, before this, before Amelia and before this whole journey began. Like, there's no way in hell that I would have ever thought that I'd be reading a book about fungi
Fungi.
and not only reading a book about fungi, but then telling my friends about, oh man, that was the best book ever. You gotta check this thing. Like, you don't even know what fungi's all about. Fungi's, I mean, I can't even tell you how many people I recommended this book to. It was just so stupid. Like, I mean, for me, like, to even think about where, my new paradigm of life, it's a different world, right?
They,
Yeah.
they must have thought you try some of the shroom inside the book.
Right. Like, what are you smoking, or what psilocybin are you on? Which
Yeah,
actually,
yeah,
that's a topic as well that I've become a lot more curious about. I mean, I've never done mushrooms or anything like that before, but like they did touch on a lot of theories about, like, this goes back to the conversation we had yesterday about
yeah.
alcohol and
Yeah.
caffeine and those. I mean, those stimulants, at the end of the day, for the composers, like, some of the greatest compositions that have ever happened in this world probably came from people that are freeing themselves of constraints of their life, and you can open up your imagination. I mean, there's got to be a reason some of those things exist, and it helps us to push ourselves to new levels, probably. I mean, something certainly curious about. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. It's just
Yeah.
interesting how this whole world works together, and why would fungi ever adapt to create that way? I mean, what would be the goal of them to turn in psilocybin? I mean, learning about stuff like that in this book, I mean, this stuff is just fascinating, honestly. I mean,
Mhm.
it was really interesting.
I mean, the thing is, they do talk about psilocybin in the book and some experiments I've done, and to me, it's a very interesting to they kind of talk about and discover, just because you think about how trees are able to communicate with another tree by
Right.
the network. So to me, in some of the aspect of these mushroom, they allow your brains to even be more interconnected. So that's why a lot of people who are on this mushroom has an extra level of sensory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they can pick up more things. So they experienced in the experiment they've done under the medical supervision and whatnot. It's very interesting, and I recommend you reading that book. I don't want to give out the ending, so kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's actually, there is a part in there in the book that actually talks about that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we have such a frame of reference, a paradigm, if you will, of how we view life. It's really hard to shake free of that, and
Yeah.
like that's what tools like that could provide. Is to be fair, like, I feel like this whole your magical learning journey, for me, and I probably feel like it would be similar viewpoint of yours as well, just from your own journey you've been on, of, like, I mean, I could kind of compare it probably to being on some sort of like a psilocybin, kind of high in general, of just constantly always seeing things from different perspectives. And my imagination is just like, and creativity is just bursting out of me. And it really just comes from, being open-minded and understanding,
Right.
learning all these new things and seeing things in a different, direction, whether you use a drug to do that or whether you use a book. At the end of the day, it's all about
Right.
just trying to see things, beyond what you currently can see, to use
Right.
your imagination. I mean,
Right.
like, that's our superpower, right? Like what we
Well,
talked about a
and
few.
and that's
Yeah,
and that's
yeah,
a basis of the all these sensory. Just because there is a study that some university have undertake to see the kind of brain activity for somebody who has meditate for 10 years versus somebody who took the mushroom.
yeah,
Basically, they're saying that the essence of the result of the study is that you can achieve the same level of activities and same level of, like, cognitive power
sure.
as someone who meditate for 10 years. You can get there, or you can take this room that
Or you take a
actually,
drug.
yeah.
Yeah,
so
it's
so
just a little
so
shortcut.
like books, video, knowledge do get you towards that end. So there are multiple ways to get there, but there is some scientific study to kind of back up some of these claim that these things can do for you in the internal brain. Just because you're talking about the brain has the ability to Yeah, communicate cross section.
Yeah.
So having a multiple, I guess, directions of where the sensories are, it gives you more access to a lot more things that you would not have normally get access to. So your thinking would be different.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I mean, you can change the way that you think. I mean, and you can change. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And this whole journey has proven that for me. And I, for one, am changed forever, and yeah, so I totally understand. Final thought for I guess question for the listeners out there and the viewers of this in the future. It's something to think about is, if humans in our role is to be composers of this world, and our imagination is our superpower, as we learned and we talked about from Sapiens a few days ago. Just something to think about, like what's your greatest composition? What your job is to create in this world. Like, if you're not creating, like, get out there and create. If you are, what have you done to help this world and to your purpose, live your purpose, yeah.
What will you compose?
What will you compose? Yeah.
Will you compose? So that's the question, comment if you want to, but the question is, you're a composer. What will you compose? What will you build?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And get out there and do it. Thanks for joining us. And we'll look forward to conversation tomorrow.
Until next time.
All right.
See ya.
See ya.